So we pretty much come to the end of this chapter, and as Kardec's way of almost like of give a summary of the whole chapter, he has a collection of questions that he places to the benefactors who are basically responsible for this book. And that's what we're going to see here now. Um, okay. It's a series of questions that Kardec asks to the spirits. And most of these questions somehow had already been answered uh, through the stories that you have gained here so far. Just wanted to recall everyone that I think it's always good that we remind ourselves of those things. That this book is the story of mediumship, is the medium's book. Although all the questions and answers are guided at mediums, it applies to the daily lives of everyone. For two basic reasons. One, we are all mediums. At a minimum level of interaction with the spiritual world, we all receive influences, we all receive advices, guidance, inspirations from the spiritual world. Some of us have a more ostensive mediumship in which you are able to have a much deeper being of interaction with the spiritual world, where we have the ability to interact perispirit to perispirit for the processes of psychographies and psychophonies. So let's continue with the questions now, and we are open to discuss everything. Again, it's almost a recap of everything that is done so far. So perhaps I'm not going to spend too much time on these questions, but of course we are open to discuss as long as we have to. There is no hurry to finish this book at all.
Okay. Okay, begin, Elmo.
Yes, please.
Questions concerning the nature and identity of spirits. 268. By what signs can we recognize high order and low order spirits? By their language, just as you distinguish between a scatterbrain and a sense of a person. We have already stated that high order spirits never contradict one another, and they only address worthy matters. They only desire goodness, that is their sole preoccupation. Less evolved spirits are still dominated by their materialistic thinking. Their manifestations bear out their ignorance and imperfection. Only highly evolved spirits understand all things and judge them without passion.
Thanks. Just want to make a comment that by language, Kardec is not specifically referring to the lexicon of each spirit, how well versed one might be in a particular language, may have very difficult words, or may speak in a simple way and still be highly evolved. Of course, it depends to whom the spirit is addressing. If you're going to discuss a topic, I don't know, anything that you suggest, charity, with a group of 60 years old, you have one kind of conversation, of kind of lexicon. And if you're going to speak the same topic for 14 years old, it will be different. And if it's someone that already used to the discussion at a higher level, you may have a different language. But the truth is one and only. What you present for the 6, for the 14, and for the 60, if you know the truth, will be the same. And that's the big differentiation. Higher spirits, they understand the truth and they speak only what they know. They are humble enough to say, this I don't know. And less evolved the spirit, they will make up truth is in accordance to their own prejudices, in accordance to their own inclinations, and hardly you say, I don't know, because they still have pride. And another thing for us to consider is ourselves. If we are in the position of making the judgment, the analysis, to see if we decide, if we conclude, if that spirit who will provide a message is a higher spirit or lesser or spirit, we have to free ourselves from our prejudices as well. Otherwise, we're going to make the judgment based on what we carry with us, which may perhaps leads us to false conclusions, to wrong conclusions. So in order, as we spoke before, in order to place ourselves in a position of judgment, we have to be well prepared to free ourselves from our pride, from our selfishness, from our prejudices, and to be able to make a unbiased judgment if we are in a position to evaluate matter received from the spiritual world to see if it carries value or if it doesn't carry value. Unfortunately, in this polarized world that we live today, someone of the far right listens to a message that is purely a far right, we think everything is right. And if the same person reads a message that is dictated for someone that is far left, we'll see only errors in it. So we must evolve to walk towards the middle so we can have a more clear and unbiased judgment. And we are judging basically of the spirits provide those messages. Okay.
Okay. Number 2. Is a spirit's scientific knowledge always a proof of its elevation? No, because if it is still under the influence of matter, it could still possess your vices and prejudices. There are people in your world who are excessively jealous and proud. Do you think they lose these defects when they leave the earth behind? After they have departed it, especially those who nourish strong passions, they are enveloped by a kind of atmosphere that retains all such evil things. These semi-imperfect spirits are to be more feared than downright evil ones, because most of them combine astuteness and pride with intelligence. Their pretended knowledge enables them to impose themselves on simple and uneducated individuals who accept their absurd and erroneous theories without examining them. Although these theories cannot possibly prevail against the truth, they nevertheless produce a temporary evil because they hinder the progress of spiritism and because mediums voluntarily close their eyes to the worth of the communications they receive. This point demands great study on the part of both enlightened spiritists, and mediums. All attention should be geared toward distinguishing between truth and error.
Thanks. So we can make a suggestion here that the spiritual progress for us coming from simple and ignorant, predestined to reach the level of the Christs. What we are doing is become more spiritualized and less materialized. The more we evolve, the less we are associating ourselves with matter, the less we need to have an association with matter. Even at the level of the Christ, we will have a minimum amount of matter in our perispirit, but it's some kind of matter that is not even be recognized by us at our level of ignorance. So Kardec says, or the Spiritism, sorry, says that as long as we are under the influence of matter, we still can carry vices and prejudices. So if you take a highly evolved spirit in one specific topic of science, astrophysics, um, biologist, zoologist, oceanographer, whatever we think, it may be very well versed in that specific science, maybe a doctors of doctors in that field. Once it leaves the physical body, go back to the spiritual world, it is still you retain all this great intellectual progress made in that field of science. You will still be able to lecture beautifully in that field of science, but it doesn't make him an evolved spirit. Doesn't doesn't put him in the position of a high order spirit, because the high order spirit is the degree of elevation is not based on intellectual but in moral conquests. So it may be extremely bright, but it's still intellectually speaking, but it still be somewhat behind morally speaking. So it's someone that we would take this information, that specific field of science, and we should take with a grain of salt everything else, especially come of the moral things. For the second part of this topic, I would say an advice for us is very important. That little knowledge is a very dangerous thing, right? We all know that. And what he called is one of the little knowledges, he called it his semi-imperfect spirits. Have to be more feared than downright evil ones, because most of them combine astuteness and pride with intelligence. And with that astuteness and with that intelligence, you may be able to guide us towards the wrong pathway. They may be able to mislead us. And that becomes a very dangerous thing if we accept whatever information we are getting from the spiritual world without a very careful analysis of everything. A good example that we have today is with our internet, that we can Google anything at any point and you can get information for a huge number of sources. And it's up to us to be smart enough to be selective of the sources that deserves merit, that deserves credit, that deserves our attention. Otherwise, you can go in a rabbit hole and get yourself some serious problems, which is, we are witnessing that today with the so-called fake news that even being made labeled as fake news for a lot of people is the absolute truth. It is up to us to do the work, to separate what is of value, what's not of value. And why is that? For one thing, in this, we followers, students of this doctrine, we have to take care of it. We have to protect it. We have protected from fake news that comes from the spiritual world. There's a bunch of spirits over there trying to introduce fake news into spirituals because they don't want the spirituals to progress. They don't want the flagship of spiritualism to dominate. They are not towards spiritualizing ourselves. They are not towards our moral progress, and they'll try to hold us back. And if we students of this doctrine do not protect it, does not do this very careful analysis of what's coming from the spiritual world, we may compromise the doctrine. We may compromise ourselves. It's very hard to fix some of those problems. Eventually, it will be fixed because the truth shall prevail. But it may take tremendous amount of suffering for a lot of people if you don't do this very basic advice of Kardec of analyzing very carefully everything that comes from the spiritual world. Unfortunately, there is some spiritualists, schools of thought that believe that everything that comes from the spiritual world only comes from higher order spirits, which is to believe that once we leave our physical body behind, we cannot communicate until we become highly evolved, or once we leave this physical body behind, we like in a magic becomes all saints, which is completely unreasonable. So it's more reasonable to understand that once we leave this physical body behind, we continue to be what we are. There is no magic. There is no trampoline that leads us from ignorance to enlightenment just because you don't have a physical body any longer. We have to be careful, we have to be protective of ourselves, and have to be protective of the doctrine that we embrace.
Okay.
Can read 3 and 4 together because it's one of the same.
Number 3, many protector spirits present themselves using names of saints or well-known personages. What are we to think of this? All the names of saints and well-known personages are not sufficient to designate the protector of each individual. There are very few spirits with names that are recognized on the earth. That is why they hardly ever give their names. Nevertheless, most of the time you will like a name. So in order to satisfy you, they take the name of someone you know and respect. Can such name borrowing be regarded as fraudulent? It would be fraudulent if done by an evil spirit with the intent to deceive. However, if it is done with good intentions, God allows it among spirits of the same order, since there is solidarity and similarity of thought among them. So,
Thanks.
okay.
Go ahead. Oh, no. Yeah, thanks. The Spirit's telling us that we are obsessed with names. We need names, right? You have to have a name. I have to know who is my guardian angel, who is my protecting spirit, because of here protector spirit. It is silly, makes no sense. We study over here that what matters the message, not the messenger. That when the mailman or the mailwoman delivers a mail, put in a mailbox, we don't have to know, we don't ask for their names. You are only interested on the letter itself. But when it comes to our protecting our guidance spirit, we have this nonsensical idea of I have to know who that is. Okay, so I keep bothering my spiritual guide. I need to know your name. Tell me your name. Tell me the name of who you are. And he goes and tells me, so my name is Barbara Smith. Barbara Smith. I don't know any Barbara Smith. Who the heck is Barbara Smith? Where do you come from? Are you really evolved enough to give me any advice? Why should I follow you, Barbara Smith? Who the heck are you? Right? But Barbara Smith, knowing of my stupidity, how ignorant I am, I can say, my name is Bezerra de Menezes. How? That's somebody that I have to listen. That's about a recognizable name in the spiritualism, Brazilian spiritualism. I'm sorry. that carries tremendous value in my mind. And Bezerra de Menezes say it's very likely to be the absolute truth. Am I going to follow it?
Yeah.
And it's going to be the same in Barbara Smith. So one of the questions that I place over here is we're going to take as a blind faith that we're dealing over here is indeed my protecting spirit. It's the spirit, indeed my spiritual guide. It could be somebody else. It could be somebody pretend to be my spiritual guide and try to misguide me. It's my responsibility to do the exercise that we are doing here right now and say, yeah, if as John Evangelist tells us, you must take the spirits to see if it's from God. It's my job to do so. But we are coming with the assumption over here that indeed it is our protective spirits. Our protecting spirits are a lot more evolved than us. It's not just like I am on first grade and my protected spirit is a third grader. No, it's not a perfect spirit. It's not perhaps a very high order spirit. It's someone who is a lot more evolved than us. So I'm a first grader. Perhaps my guardian angel will be someone at the end of, I don't know, high school, so to say. But there is a big gap. The point is there is a big gap. I don't need the Christ to lead me yet. I would not even understand the truth that a guide has to present. So I have something that's more palpable to my understanding. But it will be someone a lot more evolved than I. I'm not going to be just 1 year ahead. With someone quite a few years ahead of me. And perhaps can measure that in light years or so. At that level of high order spirits, as we spoke before, as if you put the path of progress represent as a pyramid, now is a triangle with three equal sides, and the very top, the very apex of the triangle being where the Christs reside. It's a very small point, and as we have a big base, and that's as we move up in the pyramid, things are getting smaller, closer together, and closer together, and closer together. So in our ignorance, so each one of us knows a little bit of things. We are at the base, the big, wide distance between us. As we evolved, moving towards the apex of the triangle, the distance between us is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. We become a lot more equal. Do you never become the same? Our thoughts or ideologies become very much in common. Because how much a difference is there in perfection? Perfection is just one, right? It can't be all that different. So when you get that high order, when the tip of the up part of the triangle becomes much narrower and much closer, we couldn't interchange names when it's used to assist others. It would not be considered a fraud. So when Barbara Smith calls herself Bezerra de Menezes, it is because they are hanging out at the same standard of moral intellectual progress in which they can exchange names in order to assist me. The same way that if Bezerra de Menezes is the protecting spirit of someone, I don't know, in the Himalayas, he happens to be a Buddhist, and this guy over there or this girl over there ask, "What's your name?" and I didn't know your name. Perhaps he's not gonna use his real name, Bezerra de Menezes, because it have absolutely no meaning for that. Buddhist in the high mountains of the Himalayas. He perhaps pick up a name that is historically recognizable by that community and that is regarding a higher level, and that spirit whose name Bezerra will use is at the same level of involvement. They share tremendous amount of commonality, which is not a fraud. We spoke about that before already. So higher spirits will use someone else's name when it is helpful to us, because to them it doesn't really matter. Does it make sense?
Mhm.
No questions. Number 5 then.
Number 5. So when a protective spirit presents itself as St. Paul, for example, we cannot be certain that it is actually the spirit or soul of the apostle by that name. Of course not, for there are thousands of people who have been told that they have St. Paul or some other saint as their guardian angel. But what does it matter as long as the spirit protecting you is of the same order as the apostle Paul? I have already told you that you need a name, and spirit use one in order for you to call them and recognize them. You do the same with the baptismal names you use for distinguishing yourselves from the other members of your family. Spirits can also take the names of archangels, Raphael, Raphael, Raphael and Michael, etc., without adverse consequences. Moreover, the more highly evolved a spirit is, the more its power of radiation increases. You should know that a high order protector spirit can watch over hundreds of incarnates. On earth, there are lawyers who manage the business dealings of 100 or 200 families. Why would we be any less capable, spiritually speaking, of morally guiding humans than those who guide their material interests?
We see here that Kardec spent a long time this, a few questions on the same topic, which leads me to believe that that is an important concern of the spiritist community, or at least was at the time that Kardec was publishing these books. I have to say that I'm grateful, lucky enough that I don't hear that very much. I haven't ever asked anyone to be too concerned of who is my spiritual guide. I have seen quite often individuals being concerned with who is the spiritual guide of SGNY, who is the spiritual guide of one or not spiritist group, because the institution also have its guides. So I like to be optimistic and believe that this kind of nonsensical interest is behind us. But Kardec, I insist on the topic here, quite devote a long time discussion, because it has to be important, at least at the time that he was publishing his book. And I think I already covered pretty much of this conversation over here, that if names have meaning to us, they will provide us name that have meaning to us. You're never going to be certainly if it is or not. If my guardian calls him or herself some Paul or Bezerra de Menezes or whatever, I will never be absolutely sure. But with doing a vast research, I will be able to conclude that yes, it could be from the way the spirit speaks, by the way the spirit presents itself, and be able to conclude with a certain degree of confidence that indeed may or may not be that spirit. I found it interesting that in the question, Kardec places over here. So when a protective spirit presents itself at some point, for example, we cannot be certain that it's actually the spirit or soul of the apostle by that name. I found it very interesting here, as just as a comment, because the spirit refers to a spirit in the spiritual world, and the soul refers to an incarnated spirit. And we have just discussed in the first part with João. João just said that an incarnated spirit should not be a guardian angel or protective spirit because it's too busy living the physical life. So I don't think with a soul could actually be a protective spirit. I like the idea of the radiation. You know, the more evolved the spirit is, the more it can radiate itself, the more people it can be a protector to, right? The same way the kind of the comparison that is used in spirituals, like the one and only sun is enough to irradiate its rays to the entire Earth and to whole solar system. A higher spirit is able to do the same thing, to radiate its lights, its thoughts, its teachings to a vast number of individuals. And so it could handle, so to say, to be the protector of a great number of us here on Earth. And again, the word morally is very important because what the spirits are doing, trying to help us, is to help us to progress morally. When it says, why would it be any less capable, spiritually speaking, of morally guiding humans than those who guide their material interest? So the spirits, our protecting guiding spirits is here to help us to progress morally. Is here to help us to transform our vices into virtues. The rest is pretty much up to us. Okay.
I'm going to number 6. Why do communicating spirits so often use the names of saints to identify with the customs of those to whom they address themselves? They employ the names most capable of impressing individuals according to their beliefs. Number 7. Upon being evoked, do certain high-order spirits always answer in person, or do they send agents to transmit their thought, as some people think? Why wouldn't they answer in person if they could? But if a spirit cannot answer in person, an agent will necessarily speak in its name.
Okay, thanks. Why do they use names of saints? Because it's meaningful to us. It's meaningful for those who have an association with the Catholic Church, because saints come from the Catholic Church. Because most of the spiritists have derived from the Catholic when the Church was not being able to answer the questions that they had. Then they look for answers somewhere else, and somehow they found the spiritism. So most of the spiritism, at least the pioneers, so to say, in France as well as in Brazil, come from the Catholic Church. And if you associate the Catholic Church, name of saints are meaningful. But that would not apply again in the high hills of the Himalayas, or even, let's say, in the Midwest of the United States, amongst the more Protestants. That would not really be applicable. So you have to take this question and sense over here in a geographical context and in a time context. And again, because names are meaningful to us, unfortunately. So if you get together over here now and chant and request and evoke that Mary of Magdala, or I don't know, Gandhi, or whoever higher name or someone that you believe are able to provide to us some valuable moral lessons, Mother Teresa, whoever you think of, and we evoke one of those spirits, could they present themselves? Yes, why not? If we evoke right now together here Gandhi, and we have a medium among the stars who has affinity with Gandhi, could Gandhi speak to that medium or provide a psychography to that through that medium? Why not? Absolutely could. But Gandhi is busy. Gandhi has a lot of work to do. And Gandhi has a great number of all the spirits with him, help him, work with him. And when Gandhi hears calling and says, I'm really busy right now, I can't go over there. So you, my friend, go over there and represent me and speak to them for me. Why not? It could happen and does happen. Would that be a fraud? Again, no. So the spirits will seek to make themselves present as much as possible, and very often they will be able to, especially with the ability of radiating themselves as you speak. It's likely that they will present themselves, but in case there is any kind of incompatibility or impossibility, they may send a representative to speak in their names. But some questions over here. Can I have probably the questions? Let's see here. Are you answering that, Joe?
Yeah, I did answer, but if you want to answer out loud, yes, go ahead, please.
Semi-perfect spirits are us. Because semi-imperfect is the same thing as semi-perfect. so we have the likelihood of towards goodness, towards not so goodness. But spirits at our level pretty much. And it depends what we choose, which side of the moral progress are we now and which side of us we want to show up. Not necessarily a semi-perfect spirit will be necessarily deceiving, manipulative, or a semi-perfect spirit may provide erroneous messages or questions, not out of evil, but plain out of ignorance, believing they are doing the right thing, but believing that they are answering the right things. Again, little knowledge is a very dangerous thing. We are so full of ourselves in our semi-imperfect state that we may think that we know the answer to that question, provide that answer out of the goodness of our heart, but unfortunately be wrong. So it could be both out of evil, just plain out of ignorance.
Okay. Continue.
Yes, please.
Okay. Number 8. Is the agent always sufficiently enlightened to respond as a spirit itself would? Highly evolved spirits know to whom they can entrust the duty of acting as their substitutes. Moreover, the more evolved spirits are, the more they harmonize with one another in common thought in such a way that personality does not matter, as it shouldn't among you either. Do you think that in the world of high order spirits, there are only those whom you deemed on earth as being capable of instructing you? You are so inclined to believe that there is nothing beyond your own world that you resemble primitives who have never left their island and think that the world does not extend beyond it. Yeah.
So, I work in neurosurgery, group of attendings, and let's assume that there is a conference in neurosurgery that talk, let's say, vascular, okay, vascular neurosurgery. And in our team, we have 4 vascular surgeons, and one of them have to go and represent Lennoxville in that conference and provide a speech. They could pick up in one of the 3. They will all represent Lennoxville. They will answer all the questions and present the topic in vascular neurosurgery. They are all 3 capable of doing so. Whatever name you pick, no problem. So the same thing applies to higher order spirits. So in the case here, it's not going to represent a institution, but one individual. Perhaps we could even say that that individual is an institution itself. Bezerra de Menezes may be an institution itself. Gandhi, Mother Teresa, Abraham Lincoln, you can go on and on, maybe an institution by themselves for the amount of work that they do, or for amount of followers that they have, or amount of individuals work with them. So if Gandhi is not able to come, you can send someone else to come and speak with Gandhi, for Gandhi. But Gandhi would be smart enough to make sure that whoever he sent can indeed represent him. He's capable of representing him. He's capable of bringing his ideology, his thoughts, his idea with the highest level of fidelity. Otherwise, he would not pick that individual. You have to imagine that besides being highly morally evolved, is also intellectually evolved with making the right choices. So there is no problem with that. The same thing here, as I just used the example. Now, if Barack Obama asks somebody to represent him in a meeting, of course, you'd pick someone who represents him, who has the same kind of the ideology, who would deliver his thoughts, basically, although being someone else. And it's very important. It says the more they harmonize with one another in common thought, in such a way that personality does not matter, as it shouldn't amongst you either. So as I said, as we start moving towards that apex of that pyramid, we become to be a lot alike, because we have removed from us all the materiality of devices that keep us on the bottom of that pyramid. So we become a lot more close together, and we could actually represent one another with greater degree of fidelity.
Okay. Number 9. We can understand this to be the case when addressing serious teachings. But why do elevated spirits allow low order spirits to use respectable names to soar error through often perverse maxims? They do not do so with their permission. Doesn't the same happen among you? You can be sure that those who deceive in this way will be punished, and their punishment will be in proportion to the seriousness of their fraud. Besides, if you were not imperfect, you would have only good spirits surrounding you. If you are deceived, you have no one to blame but yourselves. God allows it to test your perseverance and discernment in order to teach you how to distinguish truth from error. If you can't, it is because you are not sufficiently elevated and you need further lessons from experience.
I think this question reveals how ignorant we really are. And in our ignorance, we do not assume responsibility for our faults, for our vices, and seek to blame someone else. So in the question Kardec puts here, why would the higher spirits allow ignorant spirits to use someone else's names for falsehood? Would it be a fraud? In this case, it is a fraud. And we are so ignorant, so full of vice, that we don't even accept the responsibility of what we do when we want to blame someone else. It's their fault. They allowed that to happen. They let those spirits to fool me, to misguide me. When in reality, the Spirit starts telling us here, if you were not imperfect, you'd have only good spirits around you. If you are deceived, you have no one to blame but yourselves. And that is the plain, simple truth. The higher spirits must respect our free will, must respect our desires, must respect to whom you want to associate with. And once they call B or C or D to surround us, A will step away out of respect. We have the right to make mistakes, and then you have the duty to fix it. And in the process of fixing it, you will learn many valuable lessons. So elevate yourself. Try to eliminate all of the things that attract deceiving spirits towards us, and you'll be surrounded by more elevated spirits, and that will not happen. But if it does happen, look at yourself first and don't point fingers at anyone else, because the likelihood is that we are at fault.
Yes. Okay. But
So everyone will have the clock with me. I don't want to have to do something again. Just tell me it's time.
We have 5 minutes more.
Thank you.
you want me to continue, Elmo?
Yes.
Okay, number 10. Are in spirits of little advancement, but who are animated by good intentions and desire to progress, sometimes delegated to replace a high order spirit in order to practice the art of teaching? Never in big centers. I mean in serious centers and for a general order of teaching. The spirits who appear there to do so on their own account and, as you say, in order to practice. This is why their communications, though good, always bear the mark that indicates they are less evolved. They are delegated for such a purpose only to give communications of secondary importance and for those that we may call personal.
I think this question is very important. I think it deals with we discussed with the question of Annette, that hell is full of good intentions. We may have the best of the intentions, but if behind that good intention, we don't have the knowledge and the capability, we may create more problems than good. if someone collapses on the street and full of good intention, you call the EMS, hold the person on your lap, and protect that person against the environment until the EMS come in, you are a very good person doing the right thing. If that person, if somebody collapses in the street and you come towards that person, see that that person is in trouble, and out of good intention and with all your knowledge, you say, oh, I have an aspirin in my pocket, I'm gonna give this person an aspirin, I'm gonna save his or her life. You may kill that person. And you did with the best of the intentions, but there's not a knowledge behind it to support your action, to support your attitude. So it may happen that we may try to do the right thing, but we don't know what the right thing is. So when Kadek asks here, are the spirits of little advancement, but who are animated by good intentions and the desire to progress, sometimes delegate to replace the higher order spirits in order to practice the art of teaching? And the answer is never in big centers. If a center, if in a place is following the guidelines, is practicing mediumship with Jesus, as we say over here, the place will be protected in a way that this will not happen. If less advanced spirit come and provide a message or something, will be usually at a personal level, would be usually guided at one or another individual in that group. Or, of course, when you do the work of rescue assisting spirit, we are then in the position of the teachers, of the doctors, to guide the spirit who's there. That at least at that specific moment, we are in the position of assisting that spirit. That's different. But would not the spirit be providing messages that does not help us? The house, the true workers, the true directors of the house of the spiritual world, will make sure that does not happen, and that will not happen. But if it does, it's our job to analyze that message, to reach the conclusion that perhaps there are enough errors over there that even if it's full of good intentions, are not helpful, it should not be used. Yep, good intentions with knowledge. Sometimes we're so eager to do the right thing and to be helpful that we forget that we need to hold off ourselves and allow that those who know better to take action. I think we can stop here. Any comments?
These good intentions with knowledge reminds me of André Luiz in his books, right? He's always
absolutely.
he always wants to take action, and a lot of times the mentors tell him, no, wait, not the right moment, it's not the right approach. He always wants to go there and do justice and fix the problem, right?
Yep.
And the mentors are always trying to control him.
All right, so you continue next week. Did you make a final prayer tonight?
Yes, of course. And now, as we come to the end of our meeting, with our hearts full of gratitude to our spiritual benefactors, all that have come here in assistance to our teachers, giving us what is most important and understanding the identity of spirits. We pray, dear God, for all that are here on this physical world and the spiritual world for assistance in helping all those that are in need. We're going through much suffering, those that are in hospitals and hospices, the undeveloped countries, the homeless. Dear Lord, may you continue to shine over them with strength and courage to continue. We pray, dear Father, for all our teachers that have continued their dedication in helping us and guiding us throughout our lives here on earth, understanding who we are, where we're coming from, and where we're going. We are grateful for that, dear Lord. We pray for the teachers, for Jusara Congo, for Joel Congo, and Elmo Deslantes. May you protect and guide them. And for all our family members, for all that are in need, we pray for them also. May we keep ourselves focused throughout the week with our study groups and return again next week. And may we keep ourselves in prayer for all that is going on in this planet Earth, asking our Father to protect and guide us and help us, dear Father, and have mercy on us. We thank you, and we ask that we return again next week to continue our studies. And with that in mind, we ask permission to close our meeting today. So be it.